If Hollywood studios can make a franchise out of a property, you can bet it's gonna happen. Some become huge hits, like Fast and Furious and John Wick. But every once in a while, things just don't work out, and there's no choice but to shut down production and move on, even if the story hasn't reached its conclusion. Here are a few movie franchises that ended before their final chapter. Eragon. Before Twilight and The Hunger Games, there was Eragon, based on the novel of the same name by Christopher Paolini. Released in 2006, the fantasy tale could have been a 4-film series, but it ended up serving as a perfect case of a movie doing fairly well at the box office while being ripped apart by critics and audiences, and killing the sequels before they started. Paolini has written 4 novels in his Inheritance Cycle series, which means there were 3 possible sequels for Eragon, and director Stefan Fangmeyer wanted to film them back-to-back. He told MovieWeb, quote, "I think one would be best off to write the 3rd film first, and then, being happy with that, going back to the 2nd one and doing all the setup work that will pay off in the 3rd. Then probably filming 2 and 3 together as they did with Pirates of the Caribbean, as one production." End quote. Unfortunately, things didn't work out in his favor, and Eragon's failure halted Fangmeyer's directing career just as it was getting off the ground. Should he ever return to filmmaking, there are a few fans of the books who'd still love to see the complete Eragon saga unfold on the big screen. Sahara. 2005's Sahara looked great on paper, an Indiana Jones-style adventure starring Matthew McConaughey and based on a best-selling novel by Clive Cussler. It had all the ingredients to become a summer blockbuster. Unfortunately, Sahara grossed a mere $119 million worldwide, despite the studio throwing $130 million into the project. It was that bloated budget that ultimately brought the action to a standstill. Director Breck Eisner had hoped to eventually helm a sequel, but once Sahara hit the books as one of the biggest financial flops in Hollywood history, according to the Los Angeles Times, any chance of a sequel died with it. And with 18 novels in Cussler's Dirk Pitt series to pull material from, Paramount had their hands on a treasure map marked with a big red X. Well, you know what they say.
An X never, ever marks the spot.
John Carter. It took over 80 years for Edgar Rice Burroughs' classic novel A Princess of Mars to move from print to screen in the form of 2012's John Carter. And the payoff was, well, less than spectacular. When Disney reacquired the rights to the story, the studio hired Finding Nemo and WALL-E director Andrew Stanton to helm the film and poured over $300 million into the sci-fi extravaganza, clearly expecting the classic tale to rake in boatloads at the box office. Spoiler alert, it didn't. The movie was such a disaster that the head of Walt Disney Studios, Rich Ross, actually resigned his post after John Carter's release. Disney originally had plans for the film to be the first in a trilogy.
When we started on this film, we actually wrote treatments for the first 3 films based on the first 3 books.
Unfortunately, since the film flopped and interest at Disney waned, the rights reverted to the Burroughs estate in 2014, shooting down any hopes of John Carter 2, at least with the cast and crew of the first movie. Percy Jackson. In the late 2000s, 20th Century Fox hired Chris Columbus to adapt Rick Riordan's Percy Jackson and the Olympian series for the big screen. Columbus was the perfect choice for a young adult fantasy flick. After all, he directed Home Alone and the first 2 Harry Potter movies. And while Percy Jackson and the Olympians, The Lightning Thief wasn't as big as Harry Potter, it was still a moderate success at the box office, which was enough to justify a sequel. German filmmaker Thor Freudenthal came on to helm the next installment, Percy Jackson, The Sea of Monsters, which saw most of the main cast return. The movie grossed almost as much as its predecessor, but somewhere along the line, the studio pulled the plug on the 3rd installment. While Percy Jackson actor Logan Lerman says that fans are still hoping for a trilogy, he's not optimistic, telling Daily News, quote, "I think we are all getting a little old to play those characters, so I wouldn't hold my breath." End quote. I Am Number 4. Although 2011's I Am Number 4 grossed nearly 3 times its production budget at the worldwide box office, it only made $150 million. Apparently not enough to justify building a whole franchise. Its negative reviews surely didn't help either. The Rotten Tomatoes critics' consensus calls the movie a derivative and ultimately forgettable sci-fi thriller. Shortly after the film's release in 2011, the film's co-writer Marty Noxon told Collider that a sequel was put on the back burner because the movie wasn't a big enough success at the box office. In 2013, director DJ Caruso said he and the studios were discussing adapting the series' second novel, The Power of Six, but nothing definitive ever seemed to come out of those talks. Divergent. As the Twilight gravy train started coming to an end, Summit Entertainment looked to Veronica Roth's Divergent book series to fill the void. The young adult dystopian series came gift-wrapped with a strong fan base, and the first two films, Divergent and Insurgent, did well at the box office. Then came the third installment, 2016's Allegiant, which completely bombed and forced the studio to hold off on their plans for a two-part finale. Stuck with a dying franchise that demanded a huge production budget, Summit decided to change course and conclude the series by repurposing the final installment into a TV series. Unfortunately, the cast and crew weren't on board with the idea, especially headliner Shailene Woodley, who told E! News that she didn't sign up for a TV show. In February 2017, Woodley said that she'd officially backed out of the series, making the planned sequel all the more unlikely. Ender's Game. Based on the novel of the same name by Orson Scott Card, 2013's Ender's Game was given everything it needed to become a blockbuster, which included nabbing a heavyweight cast consisting of Harrison Ford, Ben Kingsley, Asa Butterfield, and Haley Steinfeld. But although Ender's Game garnered generally positive reviews, it only raked in $125.5 million against a production budget of $110 million, not nearly enough to push the film into sequel-worthy territory. Despite one cast member suggesting a script based on Ender's Shadow, a parallel telling of Ender's Game's story, budget constraints prevented the studio from moving forward with their planned franchise. The studio also considered a TV spin-off, but those plans have also petered out. Looks like it's game over for Ender's Game. Thanks for watching! Click the looper icon to subscribe to our YouTube channel. Plus, check out all this cool stuff we know you'll love too.